So what we're kind of going to do today, we'll go into some introductions. Really I'd like to see this be as participatory as possible. So if you're on, I have Anna with us today from Taylor. She was invited on kind of as a featured guest speaker, but we really wanted to let this kind of be collaborative. And so feel free to contribute, feel free to pose questions. There's going to be some sections during the call where I'm going to actually just say, hey, now we're going to open it up to questions from the audience, but also feel free to kind of post a question into the group chat. I'm going to go ahead and start with Anna. So am I saying that right? Is it Anna or Anna?
Anna, yes.
Anna, okay. Anna, please introduce yourself for us all.
Sure. So I'm a senior at Taylor University in Indiana right now. I'm studying business management and marketing with systems and have been involved with Enactus for all 4 years of my college experience. And this is my second year as the president of our team.
Awesome. Thank you, Anna. Look forward to hearing more about your team. Anna's particularly here because one of my colleagues, Gabby, who is her regional program manager, had mentioned that Taylor had went through fairly significant restructuring and was really thinking about how to restructure their team for a new phase of growth. And so gonna have some interesting insights there. So who would like to go next? Tiffany, we've spoke most recently, so do you want to jump in?
Yeah, happy to. Hi, my name is Tiffany. I'm from Rutgers University. I'm currently a senior, and I've also been in Enactus all 4 years of my college experience. And then right now I'm currently president. I mean, not president, vice president. Whoops.
Awesome. Yeah, I guess if as you're writing your introductions, maybe include your position, or as you're going around, just say what position you're in. So thanks, Tiffany. Who wants to go next? Zoe, would you like to?
Yeah, I can go next. So my name's Zoe. I'm from Worcester State University. I am a junior, and this is my 3rd year in Enactus, and I'm the president of the team.
Okay, thank you, Zoe. And I will say as a disclaimer, I'm going to kind of popcorn around and ask questions. You don't have to speak. If you want to just be a participant and a listener, that's completely fine. So if I call on you and you're unable to, or you wouldn't like to speak, then I'll understand that silence is, we'll just move on. So who would like to go next?
I can go ahead and go. My name is Peter Urban. I am the president of the Bryan College Enactus team.
Awesome. Thank you, Peter.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Sarah Hurd. I am the vice president of the Bryan College Enactus team.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. So I think we seen a few others join on. So hi, Nancy. I saw that you've joined. We're just going around doing introductions. There's a group chat that should be in the right-hand section of your screen. If you'd just like to introduce yourself, what school you're from, what your position is, if you're a president, vice president, if you're an advisor. The structure of this, I have a presentation set. I'm going to be sharing my screen and going through some slides. But a lot of it as well, I'm going to kind of pose some questions and we'll kind of bounce around. Feel free to pose questions as something maybe comes up. And if we've kind of moved past it, just feel free to post a question in the group chat. And a lot of times dialogue will end up kind of, focusing in around that. But otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So some of the themes that we're going to discuss today are a team structure that Enactus that we've created that's based on some key functional areas. Then how you could potentially scale up or scale down that leadership team or that team structure. Some of the reasons why, and maybe some of the benefits. So, one of the key points of this is just to realize that your team structure doesn't have to be set in stone. You shouldn't probably change it weekly, but you should be strategic about your team structure and scale it and right size it so that it can really fit the needs of your team. We'll talk kind of briefly about a specific point of like the timing of holding your elections so that it can fit with leadership succession and training for the overlap of those leaders that are coming in and that are exiting. And then just other ways of how your team structure can support training and succession planning. And then if we have enough time, we'll kind of talk maybe philosophy or just different theories about being flat versus hierarchical. Because sometimes we've seen with teams, if you are just creating a bunch of positions and you don't really have buy-in, or you don't really have members that are all that committed or understand what their position is, just because they have a position doesn't mean that they'll be able to execute on it with focus or with clarity. So yeah, so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and share a slide here. So we should be seeing a PowerPoint. So can you guys see a PowerPoint that has a bunch of different responsibilities? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely here.
Great. So yeah, so essentially, you know, I remember being in college and thinking like org charts were really boring. Like they just didn't, it didn't really make sense. It seemed like something that HR focus on, and for good reason. But, you know, as I've kind of, once I got into a leadership role, and then just seeing with Enactus teams, that leadership team is really critical in kind of driving the growth of the team. And, you know, I think generally every Enactus team is not going to be a large corporation like Microsoft or Walmart. So at its core, you should always try to be nimble and flexible. But if you don't have a structure, it can make it just be too chaotic, and it can kind of, the leadership, it can be difficult to wrap your hands around. So your leadership structure should be based upon what are the key functions and needs of the team. So if you see in this list here, there's recruitment, there's engagement, there's budget management, there's fundraising, there's project planning, but then there's the evaluation and the metrics of projects. There's developing an annual report, event planning and logistics. So there's many, many more things that could be done, but you know, for each team, not all of these aspects may be relevant, and some may be relevant at various stages of your team's development. So one of the things you may be asking, you know, why does my team, what does this mean for my team, and which of these does my team need? So as I'm going to follow the instruction, I'm going to take a deep breath. And, you know, really the first thing that we like to look at is just what are the key groupings, or I'd like to say functional areas that your team would have. And some of your teams may look similar to this or dissimilar, but there's probably some basic groupings. So what we tend to see is that executive position, which is going to be like the president or the vice president. And really the responsibility is for them to kind of set the vision, lead the executive board, try to work with administrative and faculty development. And then depending upon where the team's at as well, event planning, competition, then membership, finance, projects, and marketing. I think it's worth kind of noting, I would say that sometimes when I've talked to teams, it's like, what of these elements is essential? Like, what would you need? Like, if you didn't have the other things, what would you absolutely need? My belief is that membership is like that core foundation, because if you don't have money, you can still have a team. You can still come up with ideas. You can still try and do things. Even if you don't have projects, you can have a team of people that have to be thinking of things. So really focusing your team and your structure towards membership, I think is going to be really important. And within each of these, there is different priorities. So I think, as we were speaking earlier, depending upon where you're at, you won't necessarily be focusing on all these. So if you're just at the early stages of developing new projects, you may not have that big of an emphasis on the evaluation and the metrics just yet. You're more in an early phase, so you're really wanting to focus on the project planning, kind of the needs assessment side. So there needs to be some flexibility there, and how you kind of adjust, and that can be adjusted within the position itself. I'm going to kind of go, I guess, here to Anna. Anna, you had mentioned that your team had kind of gone through a restructuring recently.
Mm-hmm.
So could you kind of explain a little bit about, just maybe give a little bit of background as to what the restructuring was, how you went about doing that?
Yeah, so up until last year, we had a 10-year-old team, and up until last year, we had a structure that was just the executive board, and then on the executive board, we had all of our project managers, and so at the beginning of the year, we would recruit team members to each project, and there were several, like we do a kickoff event and try to connect people with projects that they would fit well with, their skill set or their interests would fit well with, and just build a team for each project that we had established for that year. And then if there were people who were interested in starting new projects, they became their own project manager. And what we found was just that as we had like a 40-person team, which for our school is pretty big for an organization. And some of the people at the lower level of the organization, just the team members on each project team, struggled to stay engaged and to stay occupied with enough work for each project. So not all of them had consistent workload, and we were struggling with our project managers just having enough time to spend on the project. They were spending a lot of time on administrative tasks and organizing action items, trying to get their team to meet together and communicating with different stakeholders, and they weren't spending a lot of time working on the project. And the action items that they did come up with were spread pretty thin, and so each person on the team didn't have a lot of responsibility or a lot of buy-in as a result. And that was something that we were struggling with. We wanted people to feel like they were necessary and for them to be meaningfully contributing to each project. And just, you know, we recognized that we had a lot more human capital than we were really using. And so in order to combat some of that, we reorganized our team into a structure that now has an executive board that does not have any project managers on it. And we've kind of pushed that project management responsibility down to the next level in the organization. And so kind of the base level of our organization now is project managers. And so we don't really have any general members who are just part of a team. We have individuals who are leading the different projects. And then there are a couple of projects that do require a team of people, and they have enough work to support, you know, like 4 people. So that's as low as it goes. But most of them are maybe just a pair of people have partnered up to work on a project together. And then anytime that they have like a bigger event going on, or they just need more help, then we can recruit volunteers for those specific events rather than just kind of inflating our enrollment in our team. And so in that process, we kind of started with identifying what some of the problems our team faced last year, at the beginning of last year, and then we were working through some ways that we might be able to address that, and consulted with our faculty advisor. We talked to Gabby about the structure change, and then we talked with the executive board, and there were definitely there's some hesitation about pushing responsibility farther down, because now there is one additional step between like the president level to the project managers, and there were some concerns about accountability there. But we created a new position that's a student advisor. And so they're in charge of holding all the project managers accountable, gathering information from them, and just staying up to date on what their projects are doing. And they're able to bring those updates to our executive board as we're making plans and decisions along the way.
Yeah, thanks. I've seen some teams call that student advisor role like maybe a VP of projects, to where they're the direct link to all the project leaders, and just serving in a role to try and support and maybe help those project leaders set goals and figure out how they're going to hold their team accountable.
Yeah.
So did you say that you had more or less shrunk the size of your general membership, and
Yes.
you're now just having those project leaders go out and kind of solicit for volunteers when you need it
Right.
to scale up for an event?
Yeah, and a lot of our projects are like in process and they're building right now. And so, you know, we have some legacy projects that are continuing, but with our new projects, the project managers figure out what needs to happen and they do all the research and make the connections. And then as they recognize new skills that they need on their team to be able to execute, then they're able to go out and we have a human resource head who helps them identify students who have those skills or are interested in building that skill set, and they're able to just build their team as needed versus just recruiting two teams and then not meeting everyone's skills.
Great, thank you. Yeah, it seems to be a function, I think as we discussed with some of the other students and definitely teams that I've worked with, the type of organizational structure you can have definitely is dependent upon the size and commitment level of your team members. So, you know, I was speaking with a team that I work with out of Minnesota a couple days ago, and they have like 65 fairly active members. So they have a 10-member e-board, and they just really have like a lot of sub positions that the e-board member kind of is responsible for. So a team of that size can support some hierarchy, and it allows them to kind of expand the scope out there a little bit. How's it going, Zach? I see that you joined us here.
Yeah, good. I don't know, my link wasn't working earlier. I was trying to get it to work and finally just got on.
Hey, no worries. This is Zach. Well, I'll let you introduce yourself if you want to.
Yeah, I'm Zack Kerner. I'm from University of Kearney in Nebraska, originally from Rapido, Nebraska, just a little bit away here. But junior here at UNK and the president of Enactus here.
Cool. Well, thank you. We just got started a little bit ago kind of talking about the structure based on different functional areas. So yeah, the size and the commitment of your membership's going to really affect what kind of structure you can support, as well as what the current priorities on the team are. So I'm going to jump back here to the presentation briefly and kind of skip ahead on some slides. But you know, as you can see, this is maybe a recommended structure based on what are the key priorities. Already having said, you know, membership is really important, and I think, you know, as a leader, definitely team sustainability, always have to be thinking, how are we not staying satisfied with the size of our membership? Particularly, how are we recruiting more freshmen and sophomores that are going to be the future of the team once you have graduated on. So, sorry, I'm adjusting the battery power here so I can have life here. But we're seeing that, so sometimes the position might not be relevant. So I'm going to kind of skip through this. We've kind of talked about a little bit that, you know, if you're a team that's maybe not competing, maybe you're new or you're not having a competition year, you definitely would not be prioritizing developing an annual report. So I guess the main thing about this slide is to just, as a leadership team, be thinking about what are the priorities, because everyone can build a list. There's always something to do. But what would really be the essential things that you would want that leader to accomplish? And, you know, as a president, be thinking about how each of you know that you have leaders on your team that are going to have certain skill sets, and some people just are able to accomplish a lot more, and you can push more onto their plate, and they can really kind of continue it. And then others, maybe they're, you know, working full time, maybe they have these other things and they just can't kind of handle as much. So you have to adjust your leadership that way. So I'm going to skip ahead to the kind of this is going to skip into the topic of how do you select and pick your leadership. So now that we've looked at kind of the structure of membership, and for us, we're seeing, you know, a vice president of membership, VP of finance, VP of projects, VP of marketing. How do you go about trying to get the right person put into the right position? And then I think kind of tie it into another thing. And Zach, I'm going to come to you because I know that you guys have done this. How do you share the workload of the responsibility? So Zach, I think speaking with you in the past, your team operates with like a co-leader, or you have had some like co-vice presidents. Can you speak a little bit of that? Is it are they always structured to where one would be maybe graduating, or there's a differential in their age group so they can kind of hand over training? And
Yeah, so this year was actually the first year that we did that, and it was something that I kind of put in because we have had to just kind of throw people in those positions. So we have a president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, and then public relations and fundraising, along with project chairs. And so this year we had 3 members that were seniors that were also on different roles. And so instead of having to throw people in there like we always have to, I recommended that we put co-chairs underneath. And so for our PR, our fundraising, and for our treasurer, we have a co-chair underneath all of them that help share the workload, and then also are just watching to see what they're doing. So next year when those seniors graduate, then they can fill in those roles.
great, thank you. Does any other team do that where you kind of share responsibilities? I know that I was just speaking to a team the other day, and they have a co-competition coordinators, and they have 2 event directors. When I asked that team particularly, they just said the way they came up with that decision was they realized that they were really getting successful with their events. They have several event fundraisers, and it was just becoming too big of a job for one person. So it was kind of to share the workload, but also for the training. Do others maybe can kind of in the chat, or if you want to speak up if you do that?
I can speak on that a little bit.
Okay, thanks, Peter.
Here at Bryan College, we have a pretty small team, so sometimes our projects can get overlapped a little bit. So what we found was a lot of times our events coordinator that we have would work often with our recruitment director, since often a lot of our events that were on campus were kind of used for both ways to get our name out there and the word out about us, as well as complete the project that we were working on. So that would fall into the same category for those 2 often, and that would help us a little bit in that area.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, another kind of natural alliance that I have seen a lot is that the membership or recruitment function with the marketing function. And sometimes your team may, if you're growing and you're small, you may have just a membership focus, and the marketing may be all done within the membership team. And then as the team grows, you may realize that that marketing VP will have enough to do themselves, and some of the projects may need some marketing. So what the next slides are. So basically some of the things that we talked about here, with the importance of membership, we see a good opportunity to kind of bifurcate and have the recruitment and the engagement side. So as the membership responsibilities are growing, that recruitment piece just being such an ongoing responsibility, I encourage your teams to think about, if you have the capacity and you don't think it's going to create too much of a bureaucracy, push someone into a role that they can take ownership of that space. And, I think the opportunity of pushing someone or asking someone to lead in that role is you're going to be able to give them greater autonomy, and they'll kind of start to develop their instincts, and they'll develop, some of their own leadership to try things and maybe try ideas that don't ultimately work out. But that recruitment is just something that I've worked with some teams, and they've kind of created a position to focus on recruitment year round. And they've really seen some gains because it's kind of kept that person's been able to push the limits of creating new classrooms they can go in and pitch to, and posting more flyers, and getting social media kind of expanded in that way. The project's role is, I think, as most people have kind of talked about, that is a natural part of the team structures to have that project manager in there. So I want to kind of talk for just a second about specifically, so I'm going to go off the share back. How does your team use, so speak on the issue of elections, and when you have that structure of the formal transition of leadership, when do you hold those elections, and how do you prepare for either training prior to the election or training after the election to get that transition of leadership prepared? Anna, do you want to?
Sure. So our team actually does not hold elections for our executive board positions. We have an application and interview selection process. And so we open applications in February and March. And we do have a process throughout the year. If people express interest at the beginning of the year in working toward a leadership position, there are some activities that they can participate in just to become more familiar with the rules that we have on the executive board, or to just get more experience with our team. And then they can submit applications during February and March. We do interviews in April. And then we do interview and select our president and vice president during March. And so they're able to kind of be a part of that transition process. And then, so we do interviews, and then once we've selected the new executive board, well, we just started this last year because we started our new structure, but we had a training session once a week for I think 4 or 5 weeks, covering different areas so that everyone would be on the same page. And it was something that the returning executive board members could participate in, and the new executive board members could come on board and kind of get familiar with some of our processes and just meet each other and get more comfortable before we went into the summer and started the next academic year.
Great, thank you for sharing that. So I guess for the other positions, and I apologize if I have forgotten about some of your team structure. So are the president, the president's an elected?
We don't have elected positions, so they're all selection based. Yes.
Okay, so and that's just the selection is done.
So the current president and vice president, and then the faculty advisors work together to select the president and vice president for the next year. And the vice president is intended to become the president. And so unless something should change or they should express a desire to leave that role, then they would just have been training for that position. And then they would select a new vice president to work toward that role. And then all the rest of the positions are selected by the president and vice president.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Zack, how do you do it in Kearney?
So here in Kearney, what we do is it's usually right after regional competition. We figure out who wants to be president and vice president, and then we talk to people, figure out why they want to be it, what they want to do, and then we hold elections at our last meeting of the year for vice president and president. And then when they're elected, then through the summer, the vice president and president work with the new elected officers then to figure out like what they're going to do and train them on stuff. And then when it rolls around to the next year, beginning of the year, when we recruit new members, we'll go around and recruit, and then like the third week we'll hold elections for the remaining like secretary, treasurer, PR, and fundraiser. And then we'll have a couple weeks after that, we'll have team suppers and stuff, and then talk about what they need to do and train them on stuff. And then so it's usually about a month into the first semester of that year when everyone's trained and going hard, I guess.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's kind of similar yesterday when we had a webinar talking about the same topic. We had a president, they're kind of a smaller rebuilding team, and he was asking how they have just 3 positions right now, and he's kind of wondering when and how to be able to bring people in and how to know that they're ready to kind of take that position. And so some of the others that were on the call had said, that developing that relationship and developing that relationship first is really important. So some teams, you kind of already have that culture of going out to dinner and hanging out and talking a lot. But if it's not there, then as an individual, you kind of get to know those students and know what their passions are, kind of what their direction would be. But any Any other contributions from the crowd? I don't want to, or I guess this will be a good time. I want to kind of just maybe set a place explicitly here. We're just a little over the halfway point. Are there any questions from the audience kind of any topics that we've touched on or haven't touched on yet?
Hi, this is Tiffany from Rutgers. So one thing that I think we're looking towards in the next year is, like you were saying earlier, we have that kind of VP of projects role right now, overlooking our projects, but we actually are planning on doubling that number in the coming year, and actually have like 5 different initiatives that are about to start up, and realize that right now 10 or so projects isn't necessarily feasible for one person to look through. So I was wondering if people had any similar situations or suggestions for that, just to give some context. Our team at Rutgers is a huge school, so we have about 100 members or so right now, and about let's say like 10, 15 people per project.
When we changed to our new structure, we anticipated that would shrink our membership, and it did. And so we just created one student advisor role. But for in our contingency plan, if we continue to grow as a team and add more projects and members, we anticipate splitting that role into 3 categories. And so we would have one for social focused projects, one for environmental, and one for economic. And we recognize that there's a lot of overlap between those 3 areas, but a lot of projects will have like one specific category that they fit into really well. And so we would have one student advisor for each of those categories that would be able to work with them on making connections and kind of aligning with Enactus expectations.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, we were thinking of adding like another role, basically another student advisor, as you would call it, something like that.
Sure.
And one other way maybe of thinking about it is kind of in that legacy versus a new project. And so one thing that some of our teams do is I've seen some teams have like a research and development subcommittee or a team. And what they're doing is they're processing new project ideas. So I don't know your process exactly, but if you have 10 or 15 projects, if you could group them based on the maturity of the project. And what that might let you do is those early phase projects that are still really in need of good design thinking, ideation, brainstorming, just networking, that could kind of take a specific skill set, and you might be able to have a leader that could focus on the needs of those projects. And then if you have another group of 5 or 7 projects that are a little bit more mature, and it's more about just keeping the operation and kind of managing existing processes and taking them to the next level, that could kind of be its own skill set that leader could work with those types of groups. So I don't know if you'd have that much differentiation to separate.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense too, especially like based on like skill sets, like you're saying, because every project in a different phase has different needs.
Yeah, or I guess the other thing that kind of popped into mind maybe is just having just kind of dividing it evenly, I guess, scaling it up and then having them kind of, I guess, work together. I think the training, do you have particular training that VP of projects is using, like a process or a reporting document that those project leaders are using? So you'd kind of have a certain standard that everyone was doing as opposed to a bunch of different ways of talking about reporting things?
Oh, so like in terms of updates and things like that?
Yeah.
Right now, I think we're testing out different methods. I think the most difficult part is keeping everyone accountable to them, as well as finding a method or like some kind of format that works best for everyone, just because Excel might not always work for people. Sometimes like Word is simpler, so we're still testing out different methods. Right now what we've been doing is just basically have like week by weeks. So every week, every project will give, or every subset of the project will give us like a description of the things that they did that week and what they need to work on in the following.
Great, thanks. Yeah, that's kind of ties in that it's an area that I don't necessarily haven't seen a lot of positions in this, but I think it for teams that are maybe looking to expand or focus one of their existing vice presidents is to explicitly focus on internal communication, because I think it's something that so often gets just overlooked, or no one leader thinks that they're responsible for it. And it, you know, whether it's your Enactus team or it's your company, you know, my experience is I've moved through different jobs and worked in industries. How you organize internal communications and share documentation, update things, it's really important. And having someone kind of focus on that, focus on innovations, or should we use Slack or should we use Microsoft Teams or Excel is something that might be helpful.
Yeah, actually,
You got it, Ethan. Go ahead.
all right, thanks, Peter. My name's Ethan Shaw. I'm a member of the Bryan College Enactus team as well. I'm a director of recruitment for our Enactus team. And my question is, Bryan College is a very small college. Finding people to get involved with Enactus is a difficult thing due to the fact that there are a lot of other on-campus organizations. People get involved, and thus it's hard to keep people involved in the Enactus team. So my question is, what methods, any ideas or methods in order to kind of build a sustained team? You know, if you're trying to say, for example, you know, if you want, 20 members or 60 members, how do you work to sustain that number in terms of recruiting?
Yeah, thanks, Ethan. One thing that kind of pops into my mind and was built into this presentation a little bit, which we'll post the PDF to the website where the webinar is if you just want to look at it and use it later. But that's a specific scenario is, I'd encourage just look at, if you don't already have, just having a director of engagement, or having a position that is just starting to look more specifically at engagement. And so this college from Minnesota that I was speaking to, they have 60 members. They have a real sophisticated approach where this director or VP of engagement is really having a goal this semester for professional development. So in talking to their members and polling their members, they realize that their members want, in addition to the projects, they want more professional development. So they're going to be having speakers come in. They're going to be looking at having some resume type workshops. So you can almost, I think Enactus teams, and it's good, the purpose is like community engagement. But, as a team, sometimes think that your members are your customers too. So you need to be thinking, how can we continue to add value? And the other thing I think that kind of ties into that director of engagement would be, I've seen some teams have like a social chair. And so you can just say to someone, hey, you always have the best parties. You're always so fun. Like, you focus on just making these meetings fun, and how can we get to know each other better? And how can we go out for coffee more often? So if you're the president, you may just not have time to do that, or that may not be your strength, but surely someone on your team would love to just like run with that. So does Anna, Zack, do you have anything to kind of contribute?
Yeah, so those are some really good strategies, I would say, for retaining membership, and something that our team used as an approach to recruitment. We do have, we're also a small school. We do have a lot of other campus organizations that people are involved in. And so something that we did was to try to identify other campus organizations where the organization or the people involved might have overlapping interests with our Enactus team. And we find ways to partner with those teams. And so we'll go maybe present at one of their meetings some project opportunity that we have, or if they are already working on doing something but they need a little more structure and just need some guidance and connections, our team is more mature, and so we're able to come alongside and help them in that. And that's a way of growing our organization.
Gotcha. I understand what you're doing there, but yeah, that's some good feedback. I do appreciate that. But yeah, so a big part of that is more like almost one-on-one engagement with team members as well as outside people as well, is what you're saying? Kind of like one-on-one engagement with kind of being able to retain them.
Yeah. So we had anticipated in the future adding a role for member engagement, and then they would be able to kind of meet one-on-one with people if they're interested in joining, or once they're already involved, if they have some other interests that they're not currently able to use in the Enactus team. If there's something that we are looking to start, we'll just have one person who's aware of all those interests and skills and kind of connect them with opportunities. And then also some outreach as well, trying to connect with people who have overlapping interests but aren't currently involved in Enactus.
Gotcha.
Two kind of other things on that personal, the personal touch is really so important. When I've seen teams that have really emphasized that, I tend to see a good correlation between growth and retention. If I've seen teams where the culture has shifted towards it's just all email updates and you're kind of are losing that getting to actually know each other, it tends to, the members can kind of drift off a little bit. So one way you can structure that in, and I've seen it as a best practice, is to integrate a mentorship program within your team, so that those all your executive board members or any kind of senior member that's been around for more than 2 or 3 semesters, have them pick 1 or 2 or 3 members that they're just going to try to get to know a little bit more on a personal basis, so that it's built in, and there can be some accountability, that you can at least hopefully know that you're still going to have some members that slip through the cracks, but with that mentorship program, you're going to distribute the ability for your team to have those one-on-one connections that can be really important.
Just to speak on that, Ethan and I had actually spoken with Gabby, our regional director, and she had actually mentioned that previously. So that was actually one project we were starting here in the spring. We were bringing 1 or 2 students in for mentorship thing. And so far it has been successful for us in getting more engagement within the team, within those members.
Awesome. One other thing, and it's just a tactical thing, kind of tied to recruitment, but take the time to, if you can, develop a relationship or just promote and explain what Enactus is to your advisors, particularly the advisors that advise freshmen and sophomores. That first and second year are really formative for those students, and the advisors should be talking to them about, what are some of your career goals. And that's how I was actually recruited onto my Enactus team. Was my academic advisor had said, hey, I'm going to nominate you. I'm going to recommend you for the Enactus team. You don't know it yet, but I think you'd be a good fit for this. You should get involved. I became super involved, and now I'm working for the organization. So I took her advice, as you should be like, hey, so.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think some of our best advocates in our club are just like our club members, and that's why I think one mission of our director of member development is they make an effort to make sure that every single one of our members knows how to pitch Enactus. And we also have our members to recruit their friends. And I think that's a great way to get people to come, feel comfortable, and stay. But with that, I do have to leave. So thank you so much, Josh. I really enjoyed listening and learned a lot from everybody else who was here. And I hope you have a good one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye. Actually, a lot of the presentation we've already kind of started speaking to some of those points. So one of the aspects is, Anna, if you could speak to this, we kind of talk about evaluating when to maybe adjust your team structure. And I was just wondering if you had a particular process that kind of brought you to triggering or deciding that you wanted to restructure, or was it just kind of done organically because you were just saying, hey, something's not working out, what should we do?
Sure. So we had actually just begun implementing formal processes 3 years ago. And so we do not have a process for identifying a need for structural change, but we're just recognizing some of these challenges that our team was facing. So some of the general members were just not bought in as much. They didn't have as much responsibility. We realized that it wasn't as valuable as an experience for people at that level. And so as we kind of identified some of these issues, and then project managers not being able to spend as much time invested in the project, they were doing more administrative tasks. We just kind of recognized that all of those issues were connected and came up with the structure change as a way of kind of increasing responsibility, calling out some of the social loafers, and just creating more team engagement than as an organization. That was just something that we worked through as an executive board over the course of several months.
Zach, I think with you, you'd mentioned that you just maybe seen the opportunity or seen that that suggesting kind of moving into that co-leader role was an opportunity. Was it just you identifying that opportunity and speaking to it, or does your team kind of have a process for reviewing these things on a semi-regular basis?
Yeah, so our team for the last like 10 years, we've only had like 15 members. It's just how big our team usually is. But this year I recruited really hard to get more members, and we have about 50 members this year. So just way more than we're used to, which is a good thing. It just everyone doesn't have a job. So I was so all our projects, we have like co-project leaders also that I kind of assigned everyone. So or people all have responsibility. And then looking at that, then we just always have to throw people into positions because we don't have enough people that are really interested. And so then putting people under positions to know what Enactus is and what they're going to be doing the next year just keeps them involved. And then, yeah, I guess that answers your question.
And so speaking of positions, do you have kind of like a formal job title that would outline what the key responsibilities are, or do you have like job titles for some positions and maybe other positions it's more just a description?
Yeah, so for our president, vice president, secretary, public relations, and fundraiser, just our main ones, we have job titles for them to do specific things. And then the co-chairs that we put in this year don't have specific titles. It's pretty much whatever the leader or the fundraiser needs the co-fundraiser to do to help out and just learn. And then we all kind of figure out what the best way to go about that is. But that's kind of where we go with that. We don't really have anything structured for the co-chairs at this moment.
What about you, Anna?
So we have titles for everyone on our executive board. They have job titles and a job description. And then our project managers are all people who are just in charge of starting a project or continuing it. Then if they have anyone else on their team, they do not have a title. But that's something we used to have a lot of those members, and we just have a lot fewer now.
Mm-hmm. What do you think are some of the, I can see how it's like, it's an interesting perspective here, because with Zach, it seems like your team's going through a lot of growth, and you're seeing that strategically it can be important to have a job title. And I think that having a job title can be important for a couple of reasons. One, people like a title. You don't want to just give it away, because if someone doesn't feel like they had to work for it, they might then just think like, oh, well, I got this for free. And
right.
It's not something that I earned. But, I think that creating that job title too just helps to, it kind of has built-in delegation. And I think that's, I guess, just a challenge, as a leader is, even when I was on the Enactus team and a lot of the students that I work with, I know that a lot of you that are in the president position, in the VP positions, you're very go-getter people. You are able to accomplish a lot. I think sometimes you accomplish too much at the cost of training other people or pushing other people to the point to where they have to fail maybe, and see that they need to develop their own independence. So sometimes the job position can, even if you're a VP of membership and you're doing social media, having a social media manager and saying, okay, you're our new social media manager, it just helps to kind of say, this is your responsibility now. I'll support you, but it's not my responsibility anymore. I'm going to work with you to kind of help accomplish those goals. So.
Yeah, actually having job titles for our executive board has been really, really helpful for us, because anytime that my vice president and I try to take on too much responsibility, or if we create a new responsibility, we have to ask ourselves, okay, what role does it make sense to put this responsibility under? Because it can't always be us, and it doesn't always make sense for it to be us. So that's been really helpful just in us growing in our ability to delegate.
I've also found out that by just giving people job titles, it makes them, feel like they have a purpose here, and makes them want to stay around more. So by putting co-chairs in and co-project leaders in, it makes them feel more a part of the team instead of just being a member and just kind of helping out where they're needed. They actually have a kind of a title now. It keeps them around a lot longer, it seems like, since we have 50 members now.
So one of the, I guess we're kind of coming up towards the end. I kind of want to end on, it's just this one topic, and it's a little bit, it's not philosophical, but it's a little bit in the gray area of how this tension that we have of creating positions and having a flat kind of leaderless organization, or being, very much as an executive, and then there's the VP level, and then there's the managers, and then there's the members. Just what do you see as just ways or suggestions to support both creating structure and creating definition, but also staying flat enough and nimble enough as an organization, so that your members, you're still feel like you're one team and you're not just a bunch of fragmented groups. Any words of advice or suggestions?
Yeah, it's been really helpful for us to get our entire team together on a regular basis. So we have a monthly meeting, and there's usually a talk or a speaker. And so we'll go through, and everyone introduces themselves, and we have some get to know you time just to make sure everyone is acquainted with one another. And then we recap the projects and any progress that they've made. And then we have just some professional development time. And that's been really helpful just for people who are working on different projects to get to see each other and get to hear from each other. If they have issues that they're running into, they can get advice from other people. I think that we would feel like our team was too hierarchical if someone had been trying to make a decision or get connected with someone or get approval for something, and they had to go several days without getting the help that they needed. That would be too hierarchical. And so it's been really important for our executive board to keep that student advisor very close and stay informed on what all the projects are doing, so that we are up to date with them and we're helping them as they need help.
Yeah, so for me being the president, I found that it helps. Since I am the president, people have to go through me to do anything, but I love being able to go and talk to all my project leaders and figure out what they're doing and how they're doing it, if they need any help, and if I need to delegate anyone else to go help them. But yeah, just doing stuff. We do a lot of stuff outside of Enactus. So a lot of times for meetings, we'll pair with the business and go tour their facility, or bring speakers in, like you said. And that helps kind of get to know each other. And so that helps us, and that helps so people aren't afraid to come talk, and so they can get the help they need if they need help and aren't afraid to ask.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, we are coming up on the end of our call. I guaranteed that I would not go over the 60 minutes. So I'm going to hold myself to that. Thank you all for contributing. Anna, Zach, thank you for kind of being featured speakers here. Peter, Zoe, Sarah, Nancy, thank you for being on and for asking questions and just being here with us. But yeah, thank you very much again. I'll end up posting this PDF that kind of has some of those things if you'd like to go through that we touched on, and you can find that at the site under the team webinars. So thank you so much. Good luck in your roles as presidents and leaders, and kind of supporting the sustainability so that your team is going on for many years to come.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.